His rumpled black suit hung like a sack over his stooped frame. As he shook my hand, his coat fell open to expose a bright red satin shirt with a beaded bolo tie under the collar. His get-up wasn't out of place on the reservation, but it sure was here, and I wanted to sink right through the pavement. "Hi," I murmured, with my head down. I tried to pull my hand away when I felt his bony hand trembling and looked up to see fatigue in his face. I felt like crying. I couldn't think of anything to say, so I picked up Grandpa's suitcase, took his arm, and guided him up the driveway to our house. Mom was standing on the steps. I don't know how long she'd been watching, but her hand was over her mouth, and she looked as if she couldn't believe what she saw. Then she ran to us. "Grandpa," she gasped, "how in the world did you get here?" She checked her move to embrace Grandpa, and I remembered that such a display of affection is unseemly to the Sioux and would embarrass him. "How, Marie?" he said as he shook Mom's hand. She smiled and took his other arm. We supported him up the steps. As we supported him up the steps, the door banged open and Cheryl came bursting out of the house. She was all smiles and was so obviously glad to see Grandpa that I was ashamed of how I felt. "Grandpa," she yelled happily, "you came to see us." Grandpa smiled and Mom let go of him as he stretched out his arms to my 10-year-old sister, who was still young enough to be hugged. "Winkinkala, little girl," he greeted her, and then collapsed. He had fainted. Mom and I carried him into the sewing room where we had a spare bed. After we had Grandpa on the bed, Mom stood there helplessly patting his shoulder. "Shouldn't we call the doctor, Mom?" I suggested, since she didn't seem to know what to do. "Yes," she agreed with a sigh. "You make Grandpa comfortable, Martin." I reluctantly moved to the bed. I knew Grandpa wouldn't want to have Mom undress him, but I didn't want to either. He was so skinny and frail that his coat slipped off easily. When I loosened his tie and opened his shirt collar, I felt a small leather pouch that hung from a thong around his neck. I left it alone and moved to remove his boots. The scuffed old cowboy boots were tight, and he moaned as I put pressure on his legs to jerk them off. I put the boots on the floor and saw why they fit so tight. Each one was stuffed with money. I looked at the bills that lined the boots and started to ask about them, but Grandpa's eyes were closed again. Mom came back with a basin of water. "The doctor thinks Grandpa is suffering from heat exhaustion," she explained as she bathed Grandpa's face. Mom gave a big sigh. "Oh, Martin, how do you suppose he got here?" We found out after the doctor's visit. Grandpa was angrily sitting up in bed while Mom tried to feed him some soup. "Tonight you let Marie feed you, Grandpa," spoke my dad, who had gotten home from work just as the doctor was leaving. "You're not really sick," he said as he gently pushed Grandpa back against the pillows. "The doctor said you just got too tired and hot after your long trip." Grandpa relaxed, and between the sips of soup he told us of his journey. Soon after our visit to him, Grandpa decided that he would like to see where his only living descendants lived and what our home was like. Besides, he admitted sheepishly, he was lonesome after we left.